Herb, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. And with Courial, there is always a lot I want to talk about with every company. With this company, because you had a previous one in the space, and your experience in this gig space is really interesting, intriguing. And props to Harry for introducing us. And I'm curious though, for people who aren't familiar, what is Courial doing today?
So, Courial is a last mile courier and errand service for everything. And we're particularly focused on empowering frontline communities and gig workers. And we built it with a people first approach to technology. So, we're making it easier for them to afford electrified vehicles, making it easier for them to earn more money, and giving them a space where they can work and feel like they're, have some sense of dignity about the work they do.
With this company. So why did you start in the first place? I always am curious about that because entrepreneurs, especially if they've had another company before, you have like this world of options where you can start anything in any space. So why this particular company for you?
Well, I'm not sure how much you know about my background, right? I'm not sure Harry told you. It's sort of
I
securities,
do my
right?
research.
so, I started, my adult life as a physicist, and then somehow ended up becoming a filmmaker. So, I mean, not somehow, but I made some decisions that led me on that path. So I was working as a filmmaker for a while, and then I made a movie that was supposed to be like my big splash, like my own personal, writing, directing thing, and um, ended up putting a lot of my own personal funds into it, which is, you never should do that, but I was so convinced this was the one I did, and a lot of the other partners and collaborators that I brought on to help me, they put up some money and they were supposed to bring more money, but during the production of the movie, they just sort of bailed, and I was left kind of holding the bag, and
Jeez.
I ended up finishing the movie, barely finishing the movie, but not having enough money to pay the cast, the crew, and vendors like their last check, which was almost $100,000, and so it became a really tough time for me. So I ended up in a really dark place, just like you know. Long story short, I actually end up you know walking away from a relationship because it was toxic at the time because of what I was going through. End up literally, I had a car, so I ended up living in my car for a little bit and trying to figure out how did I get here, and being in a position where you're kind of successful as a filmmaker, independent filmmaker, so you kind of don't want anybody to really know what you're going through, so you kind of want to ask for help. So I was sort of in that place where I'm gonna figure this out, right? And a friend of mine, accidentally found out what I was doing and said, "Dude, what are you doing? What's going on?" So, and I was like, so I finally told him, and he's like, "Man, you cannot do this." So I went and stayed with him for a little bit while I tried to figure out my next move. And during that time, I started seeing all the commercials for. This was about 7 years ago. I started seeing all the commercials for Uber and Lyft, and I started thinking, oh, you know what? This could be good for me right now. It could be cathartic. Talk to strangers all day about what I was going through, the hell that was my life at the time.
Yeah.
And so I decided to do that. And this is how I met Harry. So once I started on that journey, I did a bunch of research about what it's like to be a driver and the things you need to do, the equipment you need to have, blah blah blah. And one of the things that everyone kept saying was you need to drive for Uber and Lyft at the same time, right? If you want to really do it. So I did that, and within a short period of time, this was here in LA too. Within a short period of time, I realized this is really difficult to have one app on one phone, app on another phone, driving through LA and these crazy streets and freeways and trying to have a conversation with your customer at the same time. It
Yep.
was insane. And I was like, okay, this is technology. There has to be a tool that you can use that would aggregate all these platforms into one device so that you don't have to do all that stuff. So that's when I'd heard about Harry. So I reached out to Harry and I was like, hey, I'm a new driver, and I know there's got to be something out there where I could like kind of connect all the apps together in one place. And he's like, no, there's nothing like that, but that's a great idea. If you find one, let me know. I'll talk about it, and or if you want to build one, something like that. So that gave me the idea. I was like, okay, maybe it's just something I can create. Mind you, I was a physicist before, but I was a while ago. Up until this point, I've been a filmmaker, right? So that part of my brain hasn't been utilized for quite some time. so, so I didn't know anything about coding and any of that stuff, and so I started just telling passengers about the idea, and passengers started loving it. And then I would talk to drivers about it, and drivers like, "Oh my God, if you can get that bill out, I would pay for that in a minute." So I was like, "Wow, okay." So then I just started tossing this around, and I didn't know anyone in Silicon Valley except an old buddy from college, right? So I called him up and I was like, "Hey, I have this idea for a tech company." I know you're working in tech, and he's like, "Oh God, here we go again." Because pretty much anyone who works in tech, everyone in their family has an idea for a startup, right?
Of course, of
so,
course, of course.
right. So he was like, "Okay, here we go again." And I told him what I had. And he's like, "Whoa, that's amazing." And I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, that's amazing." I'm like, "Okay, cool." I was like, "Well, I was thinking of coming up there." He said, "Well, perfect, because I'm about to go out of town for a few weeks. You can stay at my place." So I went up to San Francisco, which was great too, because it got me out of LA, because I was terrified that someone I knew as a filmmaker was going to see me driving around in an
Yep.
Uber. So
Hmm.
I was freaking out about that every day. so going to San Francisco was a great escape. So I did that, and a lot of really interesting things started happening. So within about 4 months of driving around San Francisco, me telling everyone who got into the car about this idea, I I met one of my passengers. I pitched it to, loved it so much. He was just starting a new angel fund with a buddy, and they gave me $100,000.
Oh wow.
So literally, that launched my first company. So then I stopped driving for a while, started to build that company, trying to find developers and what have you, and then started to build that out and iterate. And then about 3 months after that, um, somebody from this really famous accelerator got into the car, and I pitched them, and they're like, "That's a great idea. You should consider applying." So I did. And next thing I knew, I was in Y Combinator.
That's
Um,
amazing.
so, mind you, this is literally about 6 months after sleeping in my car, right?
That's
so,
crazy.
so all of a sudden now, I'm like a tech entrepreneur, like just out of nowhere, right? And so that company, we launched it, launched the product. Drivers loved it. It took off. But partly because I didn't know what the hell I was doing, that company sort of crashed and burned, because I literally didn't know what I was doing. I was like, I literally was just lost, because I was like, how did I get here? Like, it was so
Yeah.
fast. But I learned a lot. And right before I left the company, I had the idea for Courial, which was to do something, because the first company, Maestro, which was just an aggregator, really, it was really small. It was never really intended to turn into anything. Like, there was never really something I saw becoming a $1 billion company, right? It was
Yeah.
a really
Yeah.
cool tool that was going to be great for drivers. The big thing about Maestro for me, more than anything, was the ability to allow drivers to drive, without being distracted, right?
Yeah.
So they could like focus on driving, and the technology can take care of, selecting rides and stuff like that. And so that was the big thing for me, which I loved about it, and which most drivers loved about it. So it was always a tool. So I never saw it as being this $1 billion company. So I was always trying to find a pivot, and then Courial was a pivot. Part of the issue was with my last company is the co-founders weren't really that interested in the pivot I wanted to do. They wanted, they had loftier ideas of turning the first company into an Uber, in which I
Yeah.
never saw it. So I left, and then I started working on Courial. And because of the problems I had with the first company, as far as like finding developers and collaborators early on, for Coreal, I decided to do as much as I could on my own. So I basically taught myself how to code and taught myself how to design. So I actually wrote the entire code base, the system architecture for Courial, and I designed the entire app, both apps and the website, and the website myself. And so I got it all started, and then I was able to bring in some developers, as I had more cash, because I started consulting as well. So as I had a little bit more cash, I started to bring in some developers to help build out the rest of it. So, which was great because it took so long to kind of figure out what it was going to be, how it was going to look, and everything. So being able to have it all come from one place, where I was the designer as well as
The builder, the
like
developer.
like the builder, the CTO, basically was driving the technology. It made the process much easier, much faster as we would build for such a small team. So we did that, and then after we were in stealth mode for about a year, almost a year, and then right during the pandemic is when we were really building, which is perfect because I had an opportunity to just kind of like dig in
Yep.
and just work and getting the product built. And then we launched the MVP last spring, um, and we pretty much, initially we just bootstrapped. It was just, some of my cash, and I had a partner who came on early on, and he put up some of his cash as well, and that's kind of how we started it. And then last year, after we launched, we were able to raise a little bit more money through friends and family, and then we got lucky and got accepted into this climate tech incubator called Elemental. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they've been great. And we're still in that program right now. We have like another month to go, and they gave us a little bit of money as well. And so we just started building from there. And funny thing was, when we first launched it, it was focused on being more of a B2C play,
Yep.
kind of like you just open the app and order something, right? The idea for us was really, you know, I should go back a little bit to talk a little bit about the company. So as far as the company, the product itself, the whole idea for Courial was this: most gig workers drive for 3 to 6 platforms,
Yeah.
right? And the technology that's used to allow people to go pick things up and track them, it's not particularly unique and it's not particularly difficult to build. I mean, hey, I taught myself to code and I built it. So that tells you how simple the technology is, right? So my thinking was, look, if the technology is not particularly unique and all the people are doing, all the people, the gig workers who are going to do the work are all the same people,
Yeah.
why not have it in one place, right? So the idea was one app that does everything. It literally delivers anything or runs any errands on demand. You don't have to wait an hour or the next day to find a person. It's like whatever you need picked up or you need done in a short period of time, you can find a gig worker in your area to do it. That was the idea, right? As far as the product itself. And then beyond that, after being a gig worker myself and understanding like a lot of the issues we had with the market leaders, and talking to hundreds of drivers just from my time as a worker about hearing the same problems over and over about gamification and lack of communication and lack of respect. So I wanted to also build something that would kind of restore a sense of dignity to gig workers. So I tried to take away all the things that they would complain about, like gamification and lack of communication, and make those like the foundation for what the company would be. So that's why I like to say we decided to build a people first technology company. So where I first tried to understand where the issues were happening as they apply to the people responsible for doing all this work,
Yeah.
and as they apply to the way the customers reacted to this whole space. So I tried to solve those problems first, and then I then added the technology that will make that all work, right? So that's kind of what we created with the company. So we launched, say, last spring, and it was really scary because at first it was just crickets. It was literally, we put it out there, and I swear, for like at least a good 2 weeks, it was nothing happening. And I was like, okay, this is a bad idea. All right. You
Heavy
know,
distribution matters,
um,
that's for sure.
and then something really crazy started happening. So people started finding us, just randomly finding us. Like, it mostly were companies though that would find us. That they started randomly just sort of finding us either through the app store or online by Googling like courier services, and that's how we really started to take off. So we started getting more businesses that wanted to use our service because businesses were looking for an app like a platform where they can have much more control and much more interaction with the gig with the delivery driver, right, with the courier, than they were getting with some of the market leaders. So we were able to provide that, and on top of that, we were able to sort of provide sort of a concierge service where we can sort of cater the delivery needs to the particular client. And that ended up becoming, we sort of end up sort of pivoting more to the B2B side. And that sort of became really our business model more than anything. So now we are really doing well. Like I mean, we're still a small team. We still have not raised any venture funds yet. Um, but we've just passed $1 million in revenue since we launched last year.
Amazing.
We're doing over 100 and pushing 160,000 in MRR right now, and this is with a really small team as well, where it's still I'm just still a solo founder. So it's been really demanding, and I think one of the struggles with raising money, it's been tough because I'm trying to do something that you know is really about workers and workers' rights. Like I'm really focused on creating a better gig economy space for people who work in this space and who make a living doing this type of thing. So I feel sometimes some of the venture capitalists I speak with, it's not necessarily aligned with their goals in the long run, right?
Yeah.
But I really believe that you can do good and do well at the same time. I think we can take care of people and treat them treat them right and treat them with respect and have them have a sense of dignity about the work they do and not exploit them and still create $1 billion company. Like, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't think you need to do one to have the other. So that's sort of the thesis that I intend to prove with Courial. Like, we can build something that all the stakeholders benefit from: the drivers, the customers, and the investors.
Yeah.
Like everybody, is valued, and everybody is respected in the process.
Herb, I have a few
You do
questions.
things like,
A few
go ahead.
questions. There's a lot to unpack with what you said, and I want to make sure we get to different things. So one thing being, just going back, when we say Harry, it's Harry Campbell from the Rideshare Guy, because people have no context. We know him because he's awesome, and he was on the podcast already. Harry Campbell, he's great. So you went to the Rideshare Guy to figure that out as well. So early on, that was for that company. So for Maestro, we have to go back to that because we can't just gloss over that real quick. You got into Y Combinator off of this idea, meeting the guy in a ride, in an Uber or Lyft, and you apply, you get in, you go through Y Combinator, all of that. Just take me through how you were thinking about that. You said you didn't know what you were doing necessarily when you were going through that. Just take me through like what went wrong or mistakes you made, because I'm trying to think of other founders that could maybe not make the same mistakes, or could learn from your experience because you did go through it, and obviously you say you learned a lot from that experience. But just tell me what you learned going through YC as a first-time founder, creative film guy going to YC instead. I'm just curious on what you took away from that.
Well, okay. I think the big thing was, as a filmmaker, you're pretty much an artist, right? So you do start businesses, but they all typically like sole proprietorships, LLCs, where you just sort of do everything. It's kind of like you just gotta like do whatever you need to do, kind of thing, right? Um, and when you build a corporation, which is different, right? It's a completely different instrument, a completely different structure.
Yeah.
So coming from being an artist, especially a struggling artist, right, into that was a big learning curve in how you need to do things and like how you need to like like just the way you manage the company is different. Like, so it took a while to learn sort of like how that all works, and then also just the people I hired. I was literally hiring anyone who liked me. like, like anybody who was like, oh yeah, man, I'll help you, kind of thing.
Okay, cool.
Because I didn't know anyone. So the CTO I found on Craigslist, and because pretty much everybody else was like, no, you can't do this. Uber's going to shut you down. So they would be like, nah, what's the point of even invest my time in this? Because as soon as you get it built, Uber's going to shut you down because you're going to need the API, which I had no idea what the hell an API was back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I'm telling you, I'm not stopping. I'm going to still try to do this, right? Because this is going to be great for drivers. So I know there's a way this can happen. So yeah, so one of the only people who I found that were willing to really give it a shot was this guy who I found on Craigslist, and then we were able to figure out a way to get it started, and then actually got turned down from YC the first time I applied because they wanted me to have a CTO on the team, and at that point I was using the guy I found on Craigslist as a
Yeah.
consultant, so I brought him on as a consultant, and I said to him, well, if we get into YC, would you come on as the CTO? And he was like, well, okay, yeah, sure. If you get into YC, sure, I'll stop what I'm doing and come on as the CTO. Like, it's no way you're gonna get into YC. Okay, so, but sure, if you get into YC, yeah, I'll end all my contracting gigs and I'll come on as the CTO. And then we got into YC.
Here we are.
So here we are. But again, I think because of that, the relationships weren't, the best, So I think there was, I think finding founders is I think the biggest lesson is like trying to find the right match, and not just like the first person that comes on that you like kind of thing. Like that was sort of how I did. Literally, I was so lost and so like enamored that I had something that everybody thought was a great idea. Literally, anyone who wanted to help me, I literally just said yes. I mean, even that initial investor that got me the $100,000, that turned out to be not a great situation because I signed away rights and things I had no idea that I was doing. No, I basically gave them a ton of equity for just $100,000. And on top of that, they had a clause in the contract that made it so that their equity could not be diluted, which I had no idea what that all meant at the time. But by the time I got to YC, it was a huge deal. And YC had to literally force them to change it. And then they kind of changed it a little bit, but not completely. But so these are the kind of things, some of the mistakes I made, like literally just not understanding. I was literally, the guy said he had $100,000. I was signing anything.
Yeah.
Right?
$100K.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, to come up with this idea I have, like, I was like, sure. So that all that stuff sort of came crashing in, so towards the end that I think, led to it not working.
Yeah. And Herb, with that too. So I'm glad you shared that, because I think there's so many entrepreneurs like yourself, like they had a good idea, just they haven't been a founder before. So it's like, you don't know what you don't know, right? Like you don't know these mistakes if you haven't been through it or you haven't talked to someone. And like, for me, that's what like fuels me to talk to more people and share these stories, because there's always takeaways where if someone listens to it, they're like, oh, that's right, I should probably do a little more vetting on that person, or like, let's look at these deals a bit more, look at these terms a bit more. And like, I find that really useful and valuable from that. And for you then, going from that experience, then you say, okay, you have another start, another company, you have this company now. You're like, okay, I'm going to teach myself how to code, which by the way is incredible. What did you do to teach yourself code? I'm curious. Did you go through a boot camp? Did you just look online?
No. I didn't have the time to do that. So I got online. I got a couple of books, but mostly just there was a lot of stuff available online. I got online and I started kind of figuring things out. And what I learned as I talked to more developers, this is all they do anyway. They Google
everything.
Shit all the time.
Exactly.
They Google everything. And literally you just Google like, okay, how do I change this to blue? Or how do I make, like, it's just Google it and it's like the code's right there. And you just start messing with it. Like you can, so that's what I started to do. I basically learned, I really taught myself like Python and HTML5. That was really basically what I started with. And then kind of went from there. And then, so just kind of got the basic foundation done. And then started sort of writing out the algos pretty much in English at first. And then started trying to build them out. And then once I brought a team on, I started to, kind of like pass it on to them. And I still pretty much manage a team right now myself.
You do. Okay, perfect. And then from that too, so going from that, so you have enough coding knowledge to be dangerous, let's just say, to build something. And you're like 160,000 in MRR, which is great. To that point, like you mentioned, like you launched, you kind of had crickets initially. What, like, as you look at it now, like what kind of fueled that growth? You said some of it was kind of random, but as you kind of drill into it, how do you think about that now in terms of acquisition and growing beyond? Because obviously if you want to keep growing, I forgot that the acquisition pipeline. Like, how do you think of that now, at least with the company?
Yeah. So one of the reasons why it was harder to raise money too is because I just didn't have the time. Like I was so, being a solo founder and also the CTO and running operations and product and everything all by yourself. And almost everyone I brought on, I literally trained them in what they do and now, because I couldn't afford to bring on like C-level people. So I had to
Yeah,
bring on
yeah,
junior level people that I had to train. And now they're all doing really well. Like, especially my operations guy, Steve. I mean, he came on as an intern and I trained him, and now, man, he just like he's created a whole new thing on his own. It's really amazing to watch, watch him rise. So that's kind of what I've been doing, just bringing people on who were eager and hungry and love what we were building, but didn't have a ton of experience. But then train them into what they were doing, and that's sort of how we've been able to do so much with so little because everybody's been working so hard. Um, but as far as the funding, like I really just had a chance to started to really, meet and have conversations with VCs like the beginning of the year, like more like this spring was the first time I started really had a chance to do it, and so I've been doing that. Elemental, the accelerator that I'm a part of right now, they've actually put a lot of people in front of me as well. So we've had some good meetings. We've gone to diligence a couple of times, but still not the right fit yet. So still looking. We're also considering doing a crowdfunding campaign, which we're probably going to launch that in the next few weeks through Republic. We've already got
yeah.
accepted to that program, so everyone should look out for that. Probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll have that launch. And the idea too is to really create a situation which is really, it seemed like it's really setting the foundation of the kind of company we're building anyway. Because the idea of having our drivers be owners in the company is so exciting to me.
Awesome.
So I am really, and it's funny. I've had several drivers email me already before I even exposed the crowdfunding idea. Have already emailed me wanting to know how they can invest. Like, is there a way they can invest in the company? Like, they're so excited about the way we're doing this, like the way we're basically doing this sort of the same thing as the big guys, except the only thing we don't do is we don't do e-commerce. It's really a purely courier service. So, but the process is the same. And again, the same guys that work for DoorDash and Uber Eats, they work for us,
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it was the
yeah.
same guys. And what I did was deliberate in the way I built the technology. I deliberately built it in a way that looked and feel like everything else. So there wasn't a huge learning curve when somebody picks up our app and wanted to use it. Like it's pretty much instantaneous. Like there's not a lot that they need to learn. It looks the same, and which is part of the problem. It looks so good that everyone thought we were like another big venture backed company when we're like this tiny little company. Really, that's
Hey, you're
that's
starting, man. I love it. Already got revenue. You're crushing with that. One thing I'm curious about though with that too is like seeing your website. There's a number of different markets and cities, obviously. And if you look at how Uber and these different companies grew, they went city by city approach, which makes sense. You have to get the demand and everything and the supply. How have you looked at that side of it for you in terms of which cities launching in new markets? Like, take me through that, man.
yeah. I tell you, I am very unorthodox in everything I do. And
Cool. Tell me more.
look, I know that's the way you should start a company, right? Because I had no money, and I literally was like, I mean, I had so little money to work with when we launched a company. I didn't see the point in trying to pour everything I had into one market since I have no money at all. So what I did is I said I'm just going to open it up in like the seven biggest markets that I know have a large concentration of drivers. Because initially
Yeah.
for me, I wanted to see if drivers thought we had a business model that they could they can sink their teeth into, that they could like and appreciate. So I just put it out, and in like seven markets as soon as we launch, um, and that really is what saved us, right? It's because we were so wide, we weren't getting a lot of business in, but because we were so wide, it exposed us in a lot of places at the same time, and so we looked like we were bigger than we actually were. So that attracted businesses to us who didn't know we had just launched a company actually.
I love it. I love it.
and
Scrappy.
yeah, and one of our biggest customers right now, is a company called Easy Cater, who's about to go public, as far as I understand. They they sort of found us during that time, and they liked our mission creed. They liked what we were about. They liked we were about empowering drivers, making sure they're paid well, making sure they can work with dignity and respect. They loved that. They loved the fact because I mean, they had worked with everybody else before, and that was one of the things that they had a trouble with. Is like they felt the drivers were being exploited too much. So they liked the fact that that was a different direction that we were going in. So they wanted to give us a shot. So they started us off with 20 deliveries about a year ago, and now we're up to almost 800 a week, with them alone.
Jeez.
So and expanding in multiple cities every few weeks. So I think the fact me being us being unorthodox and saying, you know what, hey, I should probably just start in San Francisco and see what happens. But I have no money, so what the hell? Just throw it on the window, and that actually turned out to be good for us. I don't recommend it actually. Like I wouldn't tell other founders, yeah, do that. I think it was sort of a unique situation for us, and it actually helped, and it worked out for us.
What other ways are you unorthodox in terms of how you're building this and how you think about this? Because you definitely have a unique background with this film thing. You went through YC, then like you have this background that's like, all right, you have all this like breadth of experience. Like, how else are you unorthodox in terms of thinking about how you're growing this?
Well, for instance, like we put a heavy like we focus a lot on people, right? And not as much in technology. Now, it is a technology company, but again, like I say, a lot of the technology that's is required to do what we do is not particularly unique, right?
Yeah.
So I can't compete with the big guys on technology, but I can compete with them being more human, right? Being, like more human kindness, like creating a place that feels like home for these gig workers, right? So one of the things we do that's different is we have a live dispatch center, which is the nucleus of our company, which is ran by actual human beings in America, that actually some of which were drivers before. So our gig workers are constantly in communication with a live person throughout the day if they have any issues. And this is something that they love and really appreciate us for. And on top of that, we also connected the dispatch to the customers. So the customers, our dispatch, and our couriers, our courials, are all in communication toward the life cycle of a delivery. So it's like that type of communication is really what's, I think, been allowing us to grow so fast, because that's what a lot of companies seem to be yearning for, the opportunity to feel like they have a courier that actually belongs to them, that they could talk to, communicate well, because things change all the time.
Yeah.
Like I would say, technology alone is just not enough to build these companies properly. Technology alone works a lot in AI and other companies like that. But what I'm finding in this particular space, in the delivery space, it's a service industry, really. So you can't rely completely on technology. And I think the bigger companies rely too much on technology, and I think that's why there's so much pushback now in the way in a driver that's dissatisfaction, even now spilling with customer dissatisfaction, because technology can't do it all. Like if someone is lost or the address is bad, and you have to try to text DoorDash or Uber, and you talk to a bot, and then once the bot's finished with you, you talk to someone in India that can hardly speak English. Like, I mean, you're on the road when this is all happening. So what are you
Mhm.
going to do? You're going to just leave the food somewhere because you need to go to your next gig so you can make money to pay your bills, right? So by having a human connection where there's an actual human being a text away, a phone call away, that can actually say, "Hey, oh yo, the address has been wrong. I'm talking to the customer right now. Let me get that to you. Boom, fixed, right? Or I don't know where to park. There's nowhere to park, and then you got to contact the customer and try to figure out. And like all these ways of communicating that sometimes makes it harder for them to do their job. We've simplified to our platform.
Hold on. With
Another
that,
thing,
I got to ask him this because I can't pass this up. Okay, what is like the ratio then of like your humans that are actually able to help versus the drivers? Obviously, the tech companies are trying to do this at scale so they can hit a bigger scale and obviously grow and all that sort of stuff. But like, is there a ratio you have of you're trying to keep, or is there like we have people on that just are handling this full time? I just am curious now how that works in terms of how you're looking at it.
okay, so right now, because we're so small, we have just one dispatch center,
Yep.
and it's ram. It's like I have like 4 people in it working there,
Okay.
and that's where everyone communicates with. But as we scale, there's going to be a dispatch center in different markets. Like there'll be one, East Coast, West Coast,
Yeah.
Midwest, the South. There'll be a center for each one. And another thing that we do too is like I say, the I think one of the things a lot of the big companies do is they overspend on engineers, right? Like, I have nothing against, going to Stanford and MIT and coming out with a computer science degree at 21 and then getting offered $200,000 by Uber, right? I mean, that's great.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen at Courial, right? At Courial, we want engineers that are coming to work. Like, you're not going to come work with us and work on one tiny problem all day. You're going to come with us and find a way to build something new, right? And
Yeah.
take us to the next level. And so for us, because we focus on people, we want to spend more on having people man these centers, right? At like $50,000, $60,000 instead of having like thousands of $200,000 engineers. So just the way we're going to structure the company is going to be different, and that's going to allow us to move our resources around in a way that makes sense for us to stay as a company that's focused on people first.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think it's interesting that you're going that route, and I love it because I think people now see the same problem, right? They see this where there's like you don't get a human in any type of customer service where people are trying to automate it so that you're like, oh, we don't have to have a person staff this. Like, I understand it from a tech company standpoint, I get it, but from the people standpoint and the user standpoint, it sucks. Like, it's just not good. And so you're always trying to this mashup of how do you manage that? How do we have better bots? Okay, how do we have maybe humans? Like, that scales is going to be interesting as well. But go ahead.
But see, that's what happens though, is these companies, they become so focused on finding a technology fix for
Yeah.
everything, right? And technology is wonderful. I love technology. I mean, like, I love technology. Um, but it doesn't solve every problem, right? Like, you
Yeah.
need to find a way to mash it up just well, right? Just right. So, and I think especially in the kind of business that we're in this, it's a service industry. So it really never was intended to be something that is completely ran by technology because there's too many people involved. There's the drivers, there's the consumers, there's the vendors. Like, these are all human beings that have to interact with each other, like, on a daily basis. So you can't just rely on technology for that. And I think that's what I learned in doing the research and when I learned in building a company. When I was doing the research, I was doing all the deliveries in the Bay Area by myself, right? And I would go to different people and I would deliver their thing. They didn't know it was just one person at the company and me, the CEO at that point. So I would make these deliveries, and then the satisfaction that these customers would have, with the service and the
Yeah.
fact that they were like, wow, why hasn't this been done before? This is so great. I think one of my best stories was there was this lady who was she was throwing a birthday thing for her mom, but she lost her babysitter, so she got stuck in her house, and she just started googling to see if there was anything out here that could help her get some of these things done quickly, and she found us. So I literally drove all the way to Santa Cruz from San Francisco just to do her job, right? And I went to her. So she wanted me to go pick up some stuff from Target, right? That was already paid for. I picked it up and then had to go to a bakery and pick up a cake and then deliver the stuff from Target and the cake to a mom's house, right? And that's what our company does. And this lady was, oh my God, she was so grateful. She was like, oh my God, how many can I just tip you more? Like, I'm so thankful. I don't know how I would have done this without you. And I'm saying that is what you miss, right? When you allow only technology to run the show, like, you have to mix it up. You have to have the technology because the technology to me is what makes it all work, what smooths it off. But you got to have a system where people are allowed to engage with each other on a much easier and consistent level.
Yeah. And I know we're almost out of time, so we can't get to too much more, but we'll have to have a part two at some point because there's too much to talk about. And I want to see how this progresses as well. But where's the best place for people to learn more about this and also connect with you as well, Herb?
Yeah, so I'm not great with social media, but the Courial.com is the website for the company. And on the website, you can learn about how to download a user app or a driver app if you want to become a Courial. And yeah, and then we have an IG account is Go Courial, Twitter account also Go Courial, and then Facebook is Courial.
Perfect.
Facebook.
Herb, thank you so much for the time today, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was really a pleasure.